I woke up at a little after 5 in the morning after a calm 4 hours of sleep, entirely dehydrated, and for about 2 hours now, because it's just past 7, I've been unable to sleep, and in that time, most of it I'd sat in bed trying to sleep, but of course I couldn't stop thinking, right? Um, but I also looked at a case study of the effects of AI on being able to generate nude content. And in this case study, it was done by some people from Harvard, I'm pretty sure, as I was reading on it. The exact search I put in my phone was, you know, can AI take any given picture and just create nudes out of it? And I'm not sure why I wrote it exactly like that, because, I mean, I was resisting the temptation of lust, but the I wrote it like that even though I already knew the answer, right? I write a ton of code. One of my majors is software engineering, and so I knew that that was absolutely true. I don't know why I searched it up like that, but I the first thing that popped up was this case study, and I read almost the entire thing, and it was a long report on the damage that it can do, right? And I mean, I've only lost 2 hours of sleep so far. I mean, I'm probably not going to be able to go back to bed, and I've got class later this morning, so my day might be a bit off, but you could take just literally any given picture and make that person naked, and it's somewhat believable, right? It looks pretty reasonable. And I think that's really scary, and I think that's the price of porn and the price of lust. I'm doing this thing in my Bible study. We're doing a bit of a group challenge, right? Thursday night Bible study, we're doing this thing where we're holding each other accountable for, no porn, no masturbation. For those with girlfriends, no sex, right? And I'd say for about the first 3 weeks, maybe month of it. I think we're about a month and a half into it. No one's really keeping track, but if I had to guess, I'd say that's where we are. I'd say for the first 3 weeks, it was beautiful because I was already on, kind of the good side of lust. I was beating it just individually, but with the motivation and the prayer that came from everybody for 3 weeks, I felt literally like no temptation to lust, and it was amazing. But I think the momentum has slowed a little bit, and I think the blanket of prayer that I was covered in has dissipated so slightly, maybe even a lot, I don't know, that temptation's back, and it's pretty strong. I I mean, quite frankly, I've seen hundreds of women naked. When I first got into into porn at 15, it was over the summer while I was taking care of my grandma back in my home state, who was on hospice. And I became addicted to it, you know, happens to many guys in high school. You do it before you get on the bus to school. Occasionally you'll do it at school, right? Definitely after work in the evenings, because I worked since the day I turned 16. Um, multiple times a day, of course. I think, um, well, I know really that I've seen genuinely hundreds, and I had this thing back in high school that I did where, um, during that year, basically my sophomore year, I was a narcissistic, egotistical introvert who, you know, thought he was smarter than everybody and therefore didn't needed friends. But the way that manifested in lust was that every female celebrity I could think of, I just looked up their nudes because it gave me a sort of power over them, right? It gave me a bit of a boost, as if that was some sort of form of masculinity. Um, and I don't know, I just thought I was some kind of domineering, cool kind of guy. Now, I got into ministry at my old church. I started it, right, as a middle school leader while I was still struggling with porn. And later, you know, towards the end of the first semester of my junior year of high school, when I was considering starting a dating relationship with this, girl I had known for a couple of years, um, as friends in that church, in that ministry, I realized I couldn't get with her unless I quit quit porn, and so I did. And it worked, right, for a bit, for about a year, but I also didn't tell her that that was part of my past when we got together. I didn't tell her, I think, for at least a year plus. And that sucked because that was the one thing I left out. Week one, we had this big conversation of here's what I've done in the past with other people. And I mean, both of our lists were pretty short, but we just wanted to be fully vulnerable and fully transparent and then still make the decision to say, yeah, I want to pursue you. And I think that's very mature for two 16-year-olds to do that. But I didn't really hold up my end of that. I left just that one part out. In fact, I often lied and put myself above it. Again, because of just that, narcissism, that pride of, I was the guy who followed all the rules. I was the perfect guy. I was Mr. Old Testament, things like that. So I had built up an image of myself that I had convinced a lot of people of, and I needed to uphold it. Um, so I didn't tell her, and it was good. Our relationship our love was pure and perfect for a good while. But then I moved out at 17, um, skipped basically my senior year of high school, and that became my freshman year of college. And because her and I were in the same year, we had this year where I was living in the dorms, and she was in her parents' house still, and we were both 17, and so I had a ton of freedom. And it became the case that because I chose to go to college with her, right? We were dual enrolling at the time. I chose to stay local, right? Go to the same college so that I could pursue her over, some better college. Was mainly the thesis of that. Um, it became the case, or rather, the opportunity was just there that she would spend a ton of time on campus with me, and that included in my dorm. And naturally, that opens the door for lust. And the excuse we used, or at least I used, because while it was, mutually consensual, I initiated it. Of, you know, she had done a small handful of things with an ex of hers, um, that, I figured her and I could do, right? Because she had already kind of set that line, she'd already done those things, so we might as well. And then we kind of sort of settled on the thesis that, oh, okay, we could just replace, those memories with memories of the things that we do, and that'll kind of be reclaiming them from the past. It'll be, asserting our love into our personal history books, I guess, if you want to think about it like that. And then it became that slippery slope of we're going to do this. We set this line. And then we said no head. And then I challenged that line. And then we crossed it. And then her and we were together for 3 years, 16 to 19. I'm 20 now. for the second half of our relationship, instead of moving forward linearly, after we took those steps out of order, it kind of just became a all over the place progression, right? It becomes unclear how you move forward when you take such a big step, and then you kind of have to work backwards, and then you're still trying to move forwards. We used to compare it to islands, right? You hop islands in sequence, but if you jump ahead an island, you got to go back to the island before, and then you're you're harming your overall, relational progress and things like that. So it it got to the point, you know, after that first year in the dorms, we ended up both moving to the main campus of our university, which is a town like an hour away from where we had previously called home. And so I'm in the dorms at this campus, and she's in an apartment now on her own, and that really just made it worse because that distance from our church family, her actual family, things like that, there was no one to observe us and hold us accountable. And we were very, very good at acting like we were the perfect couple, right? As if we were the golden pair, right? To come out of our former church, that youth ministry. Um, and aside from, like her closest, absolute best friend who was also in a healthy long-term relationship, no one knew. Um, and it got to the point where um, she couldn't get my attention if we hadn't been sexually intimate in like the last 48, 72 hours. Honestly, probably daily, honestly, is how I would say. Like, I used to love just listening to her talk, right? When we were in high school, we would do crazy things just to spend time with each other, just to hear each other. I would get on my neighbor's Wi-Fi, which only worked if I put my phone downstairs in the corner of my mom's place, because we didn't have Wi-Fi. I got on my neighbor's Wi-Fi, left my phone downstairs charging in the corner, and hoped that my Bluetooth wouldn't disconnect, because my room was in the upper, basically the floor above that, in the opposite corner of the house. And I would sleep on call with her and things like that. And then for it to just slide so far under my nose without me realizing, right? With how sincerely I had convinced myself that what we were doing was okay. I said that we were functionally married because we had integrated so deeply into each other's lives. It's like, for some reason, we thought we could do everything but have actual sex, and it was okay. And I don't know how I convinced myself of that. Probably because it was self-serving. So I just had a load of bias, right? Because what, teenage guy is gonna be able to resist that if it is such an, basically, if it's a temptation so consistent and the opportunity is just so blatantly there, it's really hard to resist that unless you have people that know about it, and we really didn't. We didn't let anybody in on that. So it's yeah. I she ended up leaving because she said she felt like I didn't love her anymore. And to her perception, I understand. I sit here a little over a year later, and I can absolutely say that I did. I loved her as wholly and as truly as I possibly could. And I had just become so hardened and so blind to what we were doing that I didn't notice our relationship deteriorating. I thought that, it was all cool and good, right? And I thought we were kind of in a phase of just lock into university, get married when we graduate, things like that. I took so many things for assumed, basically granted, right? I was like, oh, this is just absolutely going to happen. And I didn't consider the possibility that it's up to us to maintain that, to maintain the present in such a way that the future that we envision will happen. And so yeah, it became stagnant. I used to get her flowers. I used to work at a grocery store with one of our best friends from that ministry. We were all co-leaders. Um, those last 2 years of high school, and I used to work at the grocery store, and so my friend and I would close on Saturdays, and I would often sleep over at his place because I didn't have a car. I would sleep over at his place, and then we would drive to church in the morning, and we'd see everybody. But what I would do is I would get her flowers every Saturday night. I would pick out the best ones as we closed for that grocery store, and I'd bring them to her every Sunday, and the adult leaders would notice, and then occasionally, um, if I would give them to her like too early in the morning, and I passed by one of the adult leaders and he didn't see me, like he or like some of the ladies too would see me not holding the flowers, they'd be like, "Where are the flowers at?" People noticed, right? It became a pattern for about a year, that I would do that, and I would say, "Oh, I already gave them to her this morning or something," but I didn't miss a weekend. At least I don't think I did. Um, just to see the shift, because I didn't notice these things when I was in the middle of it, but to see the shift between pursuing her like that, and I would basically take my mom's Odyssey, drive myself to youth, and then stay out crazy late, and then just lie about like, oh, I got lost on the way back. Like I would come up with the least intelligent excuses just to spend more time with her, and that was pure, genuine pursuance. That was intimately, just spending time as a quality time person, getting to know her, things like that. To go from that to I can't stand you telling me about your day if, quite frankly, if we haven't been sexually intimate, it's really sad. It's really disgusting because I could understand, I could understand 100% that she didn't feel like she felt like I didn't love her anymore, even though I did. And I didn't realize until way too late, right? It didn't even click for me until I was sat in her room and she was giving me the breakup speech. It didn't click that, oh, I've let our amazing, beautiful love become overshadowed and poisoned by lust. I I had just hardened myself to such a point that I literally was unaware. And I tried to convince her that I did love her, and I tried to convince her to give me time, but she had already made up her mind because it had been so long of just this kind of downwards progression. She wasn't okay with just kind of toughing it out for 2 more years and then graduating and then getting out of here, that kind of thing. So now I sit here broken, wishing that I had done things differently, wishing I had the chance to fix it, right? Even though realistically, she did tell me. She gave me months, really, where she would point out, hey, this isn't working. This isn't optimal. This isn't healthy. I don't like this. And I just, for whatever reason, it was just, I, I didn't take it seriously. I was like, oh, it's whatever, we're chilling. We are where we are, and that's fine. I didn't see her concerns and her comments on it as something to genuinely consider, and I think that's really, it's disgusting and it's disrespectful because that's not a good representation of the way I loved her. There, midway through our relationship, once I did tell her, I had a big breakdown at youth one night because her and I both led middle school groups. I had a big breakdown Like I think right before it started, because we would always get there early. Like before it started, I was just like, I lied for so long. I have had porn in my past and things like that. And she was so gracious. She was literally she. I mean, I think we were 17. She literally looks at me and just goes, "Your sin is no greater than mine." Right? So who am I to judge? You know, her and I had both committed sexual sin with past people, and so you know, but just I mean, by far, my addiction to porn before I got with her is worse than what the very very few things that she had done prior to our relationship. And but just she was so merciful and so forgiving. And I, I guess that's how I know that, at least for a time, she did love me, right? In her own way. Because I said this week one, like, I I'm committing to you, to eternity, right? Um, I took the start of our dating, right, at 16. I took the start of us dating as basically engagement in my mind. I was like, okay, I'm wholly committed to you. I will never leave you. I specifically said the words, if this relationship ever ends, it'll be because, you leave me. Um, and I didn't know when I said those words at 16 just how right I was. Because even though lust blinded me and ultimately ruined our love, I we had created so many soul ties, and I was just so determined that I was gonna make her my wife. Um, After I did my big, like, oh, I've been lying to you for a year kind of thing, and admitted my past with porn. I she just, we kind of had this conversation where she was like, okay, my self confidence is pretty low because now I think you're comparing me to other, all these naked women you've seen. And this might give you guys a bit of hope, because I can say this truly. I couldn't basically envision, like, I couldn't think from memory how any of the naked women I have seen looked, right, when I was with my ex. They're like, oh, I, feel like you're comparing them to me. And my ex is a smaller, girl and things. It's not like she's some, you know, I guess just very thick, curvy lady. Like, it's just not who, like, it's not what the case is. And I told her, like, I love you so much that I don't see any other women, right? I can't even think from memory of any other women. It's only you. And I don't know if she believed me, but I said that truly. Because I know for a fact that in that moment I tried to envision, which maybe this wasn't a good thing, but I tried to think of, oh, can I remember what any of the other women look like naked? Can I isolate any one image in my head? And they all blurred together. I couldn't come up with a single image, right? All I could see was her. And so the hope is, for y'all, when you find somebody that you can love so holistically, like so wholly, um, your kind of connections to those parts of your past become weaker, right? And they kind of fall out of your memory. At least if you're doing it right, they will fall out of memory. Unfortunately for me, over the over the last summer of her and I being together, I think, yeah, pretty sure. yeah, over the last summer of us being together, she went on a long-term mission trip. And I mean, I knew she was going to, and we had plenty of time to plan and to get our, connection straight and practice not being intimate. Because the summer prior, actually, I think it was a couple summers prior, maybe. But the summer prior, her and I had gone on a mission trip to Israel, actually. So we understood, like, okay, we can't be sexually intimate when we're on a mission trip in Israel, right? And that actually went quite well because I think we still somewhat had a bit of a grasp on it, at least at that time. But then during this last summer of our relationship, she went on a long-term mission trip, and it got to the point where I started by just. It started out great. It started. I would ruin my sleep schedule just to talk to her because she was on the other side of the world. And she said, okay, I'm only really available at this time in the morning and this time at night. And you best believe I was making both those times. And it was great. But then, as she was busy doing, her mission, I was just sat. I was living with my friend over this summer, who's my current roommate. One of the two guys I consider my brothers from our old church group, our old church friend group. Um, I was living with him, and we had nothing to do, right? He was working, but I wasn't. I still had no car, because my ex and I shared the car, and I was literally just playing games all day, and I literally could not stay busy. I had a couple of, classes I was taking with the university, but those were really easy, and just all around, I was so bored. And what happens when you're bored? Obviously, temptation will sneak in, and so lust pulled up, and I would lay, in my room, in my friend, my brother's house, and I would just be like, man, I miss her. I miss her feeling. I miss her warmth. I miss being able to hold her at night and you know pray over her and all those things. And then it just, as time went on, it became a, man, I'm really horny, right? It just devolved so rapidly into that. And so I asked her to send me nudes. Not really asked, if I'm being honest. I kind of just coerced her. Not kind of, I straight up did. I coerced my ex to sending me nudes while she was on a mission trip. Right? I distracted her from that holy work to satisfy my short-term lust. I couldn't even put it aside just for a month. Right? Just for a month. When I cold turkey quit porn to start this relationship with her, and then for a year it didn't come up a single time. Um, well, it didn't come up a single time during our entire relationship. Just for a year, lust, like sexual intimacy, it all wasn't a part of my life, and until her and I, integrated that into our relationship. But the the just the de-evolution of, she was doing something so beautiful and so amazing, and then I ruined it. I took her mind off of it. I stressed her because I was saying stuff like, "Oh, I don't feel our connection anymore. I need you to send me nudes." Like, that's just, can you imagine, right? Looking back on that, how horrible that is as a long-term boyfriend who's leading towards marriage in a mutually Christian relationship, right? Having gone on a mission trip with her previously and been pure and done those works together for years as group leaders and things. For me to then say, now that you're pursuing a form of ministry basically alone, I'm not there with you. I still need you to attend to my worldly needs while you're doing that holy work. It's just so disgusting. And it's so not a representation of how I loved her. Um, but she did, actually. And I became more demanding about, oh, how she looked, things like that. I was literally giving critique on the nudes she was sending me while she's on this mission trip. I mean, just the low the version of myself that I was, it's just disgusting and I hate it. I mean, it's just how low can you get, right? And then when she tried to pull back on that and she was like, I don't want to be sending nudes to you twice a freaking day. The only two times I'm available to talk to you, I don't want to just be posted up in the bathroom naked. Which I wish I agreed with that statement. I wish I had just fought, or rather, I guess, fleed from those temptations and just refocused entirely on just the beauty of hearing her voice and things like that, the things I had used to appreciate. I wish I was able to have done that at that moment or in that time, but no, she tried to pull back on it. And then, then for the first time in, it would have been just under 3 years, right? About 2.5, I'd say. For the first time in 2.5 years, then porn came back. 2.5 years of leading middle school groups with this woman, going on a mission trip together. I had gone on other mission trip, just myself with the guys. She was doing her thing. A year, no, 2.5 years of beautiful Christian dating, and then porn. Back, honestly, as if it had never left. It felt so natural. And I didn't even really feel guilty. A couple of times, I was like, yeah, this isn't great. And I tried to resist it because I felt the pull. I tried to resist it for a bit, maybe like a week. I tried to resist it for a little bit. Um, because I had her nudes. I had them saved, and so I was like, oh, I could just masturbate to this, and that's a healthy way to maintain our connection, is what I told myself. And then that just wasn't doing it, man. That's what porn does to you. It has you look at your significant other and say, yeah, that's just not good enough. That's not doing it for me. It always has you asking for more. And the kind of porn, right? Everybody has like every guy at least that's been addicted to porn has like a type, a genre, right, that they want to watch. I wasn't watching oh, nice, beautiful, peaceful porn. Not that any form of porn is nice and beautiful and peaceful, but no, I was watching women subject themselves to being put through pain by multiple men at the same time and things like that. Like it, and that's not how it started necessarily, but that's what it became, right? Because it always has you just looking for more, right? Even just the baseline stuff, right? The basic tiers of porn that wasn't doing it. I used to watch porn for the plot is really how it started, of just like, oh, this is kind of a nice little story behind it, or whatever the frick I could convince myself of, some BS, right? But no, it literally just became, I need to see a woman being willingly dominated and enjoying pain and things like that. And it's just, the slope is so slippery and it's so fast, man. It's so fast. And then, that was over the summer. And then, come October, she's gone. Um, I don't, I don't remember if I ever told her that I had wrapped back around to porn. 3, maybe 4 months, right, of the end of our relationship, where I was so, I can't even understand how I justified any of this to myself. Why didn't I tell her? Why didn't I try and fix it sooner? It doesn't make a single ounce of sense to me. Because I know for a fact she would have worked with me on it if I just faced it, if I'd been real. Because she knew that her sending me nudes while she was on a mission trip was wrong. And that's why she pulled back on it. Had I really convinced myself that I wasn't in the wrong? How is it even possible? How is it logically justifiable? How did I do that? how did I do that to myself? How did I look at myself and say, no, that's fine. No, it's okay. You're good. You don't gotta tell her. You're fine. I don't think it was. I don't think. I mean, I'm not. I'll take 100. I take 100% accountability. I hate myself because I'm the reason that love I lost it. Right. I'm entirely the reason. That 3 years of my wholehearted, my genuine love. Right. I figured out what love was with this woman. I figured out so many things with this woman, so many firsts. But because I let myself be lied to by, Satan, by porn, by evil, because I had logically justified it and things like that, I had built up such an illusioned, false sense of security that I didn't even see it as a problem. Because her and I overcame so much. Both of our families being kind of resistant to our relationship at times, and distance at times, and finances being crazy because I was working 70 hours a week, on top of being a full-time student when I was 17, things like that. Like, her and I always overcame all of the crazy things that her and I worked against. So I guarantee that if I had just caught on, right? If I had, you know, questioned myself, I guess, if I had questioned the sin, then her and I could have worked on it and won. But because I held basically it to a higher priority than her, I held the rush of orgasm, the rush of sexual intimacy, I held that above her, the love I had for her. It was a higher priority for me. Then all of the things that used to be beautiful about our love became overshadowed by just that one detail. And to her, she didn't see that I loved her anymore because there was no action really in the present to prove that I did. And that's why I think I didn't love her, or I didn't realize how much I loved her until she left. Right when I had a bit of hope of like, oh, okay, I can fix it, I can lock in, it's winnable, right? That kind of thing. Um, I don't think I ever loved her more than like the 2 weeks after she left me, because when lust is taken out of the picture and now you can't even talk to that person, you're like, it just all kind of falls on you. You're like, what? How the heck did I get here? How did I let this happen? How did it get so bad without me even picking up on any of the hints, right? Any of the signs. That's the price of it. And I thought I'd beat it. I thought I'd beat porn. Um, her as my motivation to quit was a beautiful thing, but I didn't do it right. I didn't know that I didn't do it right. I didn't do it properly, and it lasted a good while. But lust came back, and then after years, lust then became porn again. And then after she left, I mean, of course, I was just back in the addiction of porn. And I'm a little over a year away from it now. I mean, I'd say for about 10, maybe 11 months, I was consistently losing against that fight, against porn. And for a couple of months, I held on to her nudes that I'd saved. Oh God. For a couple of months, I held on to the nudes I'd saved that I had from her because I desperately wanted to maintain that connection, even though I was losing hope that she would ever come back and things like that. I desperately wanted to hang on. And even then, I'd convinced myself that it was love. But that's just not healthy. And it's disrespectful to her. And so came to realize, maybe it was like about 3 months later, right after the new year started, I was like, I really love this woman, and God took her away to protect her from me, right? And that's, I can understand that, and so I had to get rid of her nudes, and I did. And then I also got rid of, all of our, just nice pictures, right, from trips and things that I had printed and that she had given me, actually. Um, that happened later, that happened last summer. Um, but man, saying these things out loud, like, I was so evil. I was so disgusting. I was the worst version of myself I've ever been. I was the best version of myself that I'd ever been from 16 to 17. Best year of my life. I mean, I'm pursuing this woman beautifully. She loves me so much. She wants to marry me. I want to marry her. It's perfect. Until lust sneaks in. Until porn has you thinking, how can you weave the things you saw into this relationship? How can you integrate the positives, the good feeling of that into your relationship, and then it's, at least in my case, it's just a slippery slope from there. So that's what porn costs you. It costs you love. It costs you true, genuine love. Where even if you don't give up, right? Even if you abuse the infinite grace of God, even if you are infinitely lenient on yourself, your partner might not be so infinitely forgiving. And eventually, they might break. And they might give up and they might say, you know what, I've had enough of being used. I don't feel the love anymore because you don't treat me the way you used to. You don't pursue me the way you used to. I just feel like I can't get your attention if I'm not naked and things like that. And those words, to hear those words, if you can imagine your partner saying them, that should break you. That should snap you in half. It should literally kill you. Literally think about it. Think about looking your partner in the eyes and saying, "I love you, but I'm just going to use you one more time." Or if you're a Christian couple like we were, you know, praying over each other, doing beautiful works together. Our first date was reading Revelation, right? We actually connected. We got like intimate before we were dating. We got mentally intimate, right? Which I argue is like the best form of intimacy, getting mentally intimate, knowing someone deeply and just pouring time into getting to know them. We got mentally intimate by discussing the Apocrypha, right? I took her to be the smartest woman in our church friend group, and that's why I loved her. Because her thirst for Christ was so attractive. I mean, she is just a beautiful woman herself, but I really fell in love with just the brightness of her ministry and her love for Christ. But to have that, to pray and read the Bible with your significant other, and then to say, take your clothes off, get on the bed. And it's not to say that she was entirely, faultless, right? I had some utility to her. I knew how to make her feel certain ways, and it was beneficial to her when she was on her period and things like that. So I had a bit of utility for her, but that should never have been the case, right? That should never have happened. It should never have been integrated into our relationship, at least at the stage that we were in, right? We took things too early, too out of order. We disrespected the natural process of love, even though sexual intimacy does feel natural. I'm not going to say it doesn't. So many nights, even prior to us integrating that into our relationship, after like prom, for instance, I was like, man, I would so just desire to be sexually intimate with you. But of course, we resisted that because I mean, you know, it's not right, and but it does feel so right. So I understand that it feels, and it can be genuine because it was genuine for us for a time. It was genuine for both of us. It was beautiful, and I think honestly, I think if maybe we could have kept it there, right? If we could have kept it in the genuine kind of love category of sexual intimacy, that if we pulled back on it, but then also, I don't know. I don't know. I'd have to think more about that, but porn will take. I mean, that's just why porn is so bad, right? That's why lust is probably the hardest sin for guys, at least. I would argue, maybe overall, is that it takes something that's inherently amazing and beautiful. Sexual intimacy is natural, right? But it's also amazing, and it's given to us by God for a beautiful reason. It takes something so amazing, and it just tweaks it a tiny bit, just a tiny bit, and it makes it painful, the most painful, and it makes it disgusting, and it makes it perverted, and it warps your entire thinking and the entire way you define things like love, and it becomes this poison to those things. So I don't know, this is quite long. I think I've talked enough, but that's the price of porn. I'm only 20. I'm only 20 and I've lost so much. Just imagine the conversation I'm going to have with my future wife, right? If I do get the chance to date a woman, imagine that conversation. I have to tell her I've been addicted to porn in 2 periods of my life, bordering a long-term Christian relationship in which lust became a factor and was ultimately the end of that relationship. That's a horrible conversation to have because if you sum up all the time, you're looking at more than 5 years. You're looking at more than 5 years. Well, minus the one where I would say our relationship was genuine and pure and perfectly beautiful. So 4. You're looking at 4 years of a 20-year-old's life that were domineered by lust slash porn, lust and or porn, right? And yeah, I'm on the good side of it now, but on nights like tonight when I've faced the temptation, it's it's pretty clear that it's just going to affect me for the rest of my life. And I've signed myself up for, at the age of 15, I signed myself up for a struggle for the next, for the entire time I'm alive. I desperately pray that I will find someone who I can love the way that I once loved my ex, a way where temptation towards porn and towards other women doesn't exist because I am so entirely attracted and I so entirely desire the person I love. They're the only one that exists in my mind. That kind of thing. I desperately hope I find that, and I also hope that all of you find that too, because in my experience, as far as I know, that's the only sustainable cure to the temptation of porn. Because yeah, self-discipline, self-denial, having a group of guys that mutually hold each other accountable, that works. That's great. But for that entire year, I wasn't tempted a single time. Purely because of the love that her and I shared at that time. There might be other solutions, right? There might be other cures, but in my experience, that's the only way to to live without having to face the temptation. I understand that's not, something that's achievable for all of us. You know, it's not like we can just go out, and just get someone immediately and find that kind of love, right? You also, I mean, you have to build that kind of love, and you need someone who is capable of loving you as deeply as that too. It has to be reciprocated. It has to be mutual. But for everyone that's in my boat right now, where there's still lingering self-hatred, you know, self-disgust as well, because how could I have been that bad of a person? How could I have treated the woman that I called her my fiance even though we weren't actually engaged yet? How could I have treated her like that? You know, just disgusting. For those of you who deal with the temptation, just think of the beauty of your future love. Not what she might look like physically, but rather how pure and how powerful your connection to that person will be. How well woven together your souls are going to be. And then if you continue to live in the addiction to porn, if you continue to lose against lust, you are basically indefinitely delaying that love coming to you. Because in past months, yes, I've yearned insanely for someone to love. Just someone to love, not someone to receive things from. Someone to be the subject of my romance. Someone to be the subject of my yearning. Someone to serve romantically. But I thank God that He hasn't given me someone at all in this past year. In fact, He's actually prevented me from a couple of relationships because I haven't made the progress I need to make to successfully lead another relationship. Um, so just think of how beautiful your future love is going to be. And then every time that temptation comes up, think about that. That's indefinitely delaying it. Or, because I've lived both sides of it, if you have a significant other and it's beautiful and it's, amazing, you've gotta call it out. You've got to kill the lust. And if it's a healthy relationship, this is what I missed. If it's a healthy relationship, which with me it was, if you call it out, the two of you will work together and you will beat it. Love will win against lust. You just have to identify it, you have to call it out, and you have to together fight against it. I've seen that among my friends. I've seen friends who I've helped save their dating relationships. I have friends that are engaged now, right? Beautiful relationships who have had sex and things like that. It's not that if that enters your relationship, then it's wraps, GG, it's over. But you've got to call it out, and you've got to be okay, right, with taking it out of your relationship. And then if that's not the case, like if you can't do that or your partner can't do that, then that's not the form of love that you need, right? That's a lesser form of romantic love. That's not the deepest form of love. That's not the deep form of love I'm talking about here, that I've talked about for almost an hour now. If you say to your partner, I want to recenter our relationship around, actually like pursuing each other in a loving, pure, if you're Christian, Christ-like way, and they're like, nah, I ain't doing all that. Nah, just nah. Then their highest value of you is your sexual utility to them. And I would argue that that's not love. And even from there, it's recoverable. But you have to basically convince them that they are wrong, and they have to kind of come to believe that genuinely. They have to believe that, okay, maybe I do love you, but I just don't know it or haven't realized it, or I haven't even thought about it because lust is so deeply integrated. I can't even consider an alternative. So it's never entirely over. It's always winnable, is what I would say. But man, you've got to do it right. So I'm coming up on an hour. There's so many more things I could say, and I probably will later, if I take this mission seriously and um, I do it every day, then yeah, it'll definitely come up in future conversations, but future dialogues. But you're not any less valuable just because you're you're caught up in this one sin, If you're not Christian, if you don't see lust as a sin, then that's okay, but you could probably identify that it's at least a problem, right? It's negatively affecting you or your relationship, or even if you've done what I asked and envisioned your future love, if you can see how it's going to negatively affect your future love, then it's okay to, you know, it's how do I say this? It's okay to to be in it. But if you had been, well, it's not okay to be in it. If you had been blind to your addiction to lust and porn, right? And now you're kind of realizing it, you're not less valuable. And your love isn't just unrecoverably weakened, right? Because I know a lot of people that are like, oh, I gave so much of myself to my past partners, and now I have nothing left to give to my future, husband or future wife. And I understand that because there's so many firsts, especially from the guy's side. There's so many firsts that I gave my ex that I think a lot of people just don't think about. If a relationship, if a Christian dating relationship goes down in flames and then everyone knows the problem was lust, they just assume the guy took the girl's purity. And I don't know if they consider the fact that I gave her so many pieces of my soul too. But she willingly handed them back to me, and I gotta take them, and I gotta become whole again. And so I'm speaking as much to myself as I am to you. You can do that. You can become whole again. You are just as valuable as someone who has never dealt with porn or lust, if those people even exist. Maybe like young, innocent guys and girls, but I think lust, the second we become adults, basically, I think lust is at least come across all of our minds. So you just gotta know how to deal with it. But if you made it this far, I'm surprised. I know I'd be tired of my voice by now. I'm not a yapper, I'm a listener by nature. I actually used to call my ex my yapper, but let me not get on my feelings about that. Um, I know this is way early, because I made this because I couldn't sleep, because I got up and dealt with temptation early this morning, but y'all can do it. You can beat it. I don't want to say you can fight against it because the Bible calls us to flee from it. So I'll say that you can evade it, right? Even if it feels like it always tracks you down. And I feel like that too because it got to me after 2.5 years. I thought I was good and it tracked me down. You can always evade it. And I love you. And you're infinitely valuable. Even if you've seen hundreds of naked people, and even if you've sinned against yourself and others and God so many times, you're still infinitely valuable. And I hope you believe me when I say that, because I'm saying it to myself just as much as I am y'all. Thanks for listening, and I'll see y'all tomorrow.